Today's episode is sponsored by No Strings Attached e-News, your premier online magazine with interesting and informative articles from lifestyle, entertainment, and news worldwide. Visit the website to find out what's buzzing on nsaen.com. Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Renowned Motown composer and guitarist Cornelius Grant is today's guest. Cornelius will talk about his years in music, including his work with the Temptations, as well as his new book.
Cornelius Grant, welcome to Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.
Oh, yes. Glad to be here.
So great to have you, Cornelius. Listen, Cornelius, I know that your grandmother, I bought you a guitar or something, you were very young, so I know you had a love for music. It started when you were young, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had gone to the school that I was attending. There was a piano there. And so I'd learned to play boogie woogie on the black keys, you know. And so I got interested, and I told my grandmother, I said, "Hey, Mama, can you buy me a piano?" And she said, "Son, I can't afford a piano." And so I just, turned it off. And then we had been going to a holiness church that our cousins went to. And there was a guitar player there that was playing, he was playing while they were singing and playing. And so I said, "Hey, can you buy me a guitar?" And she said, "Okay, bring me the catalog." I brought her a Sears and Roebuck catalog, and right then and there, she ordered me a silver tone guitar for like $13, right? And so I was excited, and so when I received the guitar, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about tuning it or anything, So the kid that was playing in church, he showed me how to tune it the way he tuned it, which was like, I guess, to a chord. It's called vestibule or something. But anyway, that was the first way it was recorded. And so I learned to play with my 3 fingers. First one finger and the 2 fingers on my left hand, because I was only just playing solo notes. Anyway, but I created, that interest in it. So then a few years later, we moved to, we were in a real rural area, and so we moved to what I call Fairfield. And so one of my cousins said, "Hey, our cousin plays guitar." And so he was in the Army. He came on furlough, and we got together. And so he said, "Well, show me what you do." And I picked up the guitar and I started playing. And he said, "Okay, can you play any chords?" And I said, "Chords? What are chords?" He said, "Well, the way your guitar is tuned wrong. Of course, you have to be tuned this way in order to play chords." So he tuned the guitar for me the correct way. And then I had to learn all over again, right? And so that's how I became, self-taught. And the interest increased, and I started to listen to the radio. And one of the first songs that I learned to play was "Okie Dokie Stomp" by Clarence Gatemouth Brown. So that really kicked it off. And so from there, I would listen to a lot of blues on the blues station, WLAC, Nashville, Tennessee. And I listened to all the blues players, B.B. King and Lightning Hopkins and people like that. And a few years later, at age 9, we got migrated to Detroit. And I was still, plucking and plucking. And long story short, I had an epiphany, and so something told me to catch a bus and go to the east side of Detroit. I don't know, to this day, I don't know what that was about. But anyway, I took the bus and I got off the bus about a block from the street that I had stolen. When I got off and started walking to the street that I passed, I heard some music playing, some musicians playing. So I stopped and walked up to the house and knocked on the door. And incidentally, I had my little guitar with me, right? So the lady came and I guess she thought that I knew the fellows that were playing. Well, she instructed me to go to the back of the house. And I went to the back, and the guys were sitting there. And one of the guys said, "Oh, you can play guitar." I said, "Yeah, I play guitar." So he said, "Okay, you can plug in my amp." I plugged in his amp, and he said, "Oh, what songs do you want to play?" Well, I didn't know. I said, "Let's play some blues," right? So they said, "What key?" I didn't know anything about keys or anything. I just learned, when a song we were playing, I would slide up on my first string to the tone note, and that would be the key. So they just started playing, and so then everybody was taking turns. So finally, they turned to me and told me to play my solo. And I played and I played and I played. And when we finished playing, it was silent. The guys were, it was like, I didn't know whether I'd done something wrong or whatever. So the guy said, "How old are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm 14. So he said, "Well, where did you learn to play like that?" And I say, "Well, I just picked it up, I just listening to blues and playing." So he said, "Listen, I want you to play some gigs with me." So he said, "Do you have a telephone?" I gave him my telephone number. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call. It wasn't from him, but it was another guy. And he said, "Here, I heard you play guitar. I have a cabaret." They played cabarets at that time. He said, "And I want you to come play with me." And I said, "Okay." So they picked me up, and I played at this cabaret. And not knowing keys or anything, just every song that they played, I would just, play a solo in the song. And then it was like word got around to this young guitar player, that played guitar. So I got calls, and just to sum it all up, at age 15, I started playing in nightclubs, playing with older musicians. One night, between sets, because I was too young to go out into the to the bar area, so I had to stay in the dressing room between sets. So anyway, so we went back in the last set that we played. A guy approached me and he said, "Hey, listen, I like the way you play. I'm writing a song, and I want you to play on my song." I said, "Oh, okay," So I gave him my telephone number. About a week and a half later, he called me. He said, "Hey, your ticket is at the airport." I said, "Ticket?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm calling you from New York. You have a ticket at the airport." So from then, my first plane ride, my first trip to New York, and my first time in a large recording studio. And that's what kicked it off. Now, by this time, I was in high school. I was at Mumford High. And when I got back to Detroit, that was my decision. I said, this is what I want to do. My my interest in scholastics was out of the window. I just wanted to play music. So that really started it off, you know. And the rest, like in my book, I chronicle all of these experiences all the way up until now. And but it all started. My book is called Cornelius Grant from Mumford High to Motown, because I consider my musical career started at Mumford, you know, after that trip. And that's why the book came about.
Well,
And
yeah.
the book came about because I started doing lectures, you know, and this is later when I was with with the Temptations, and people would ask me questions like, "Hey, how did you get to get with the Temptations?" And I'd give them the short form, like, well, I was Marvin Gaye's first guitar player, and he told me I need a guitar player and a conductor. And so I didn't know anything about conducting, so I went to Grinnell's and bought a book on conducting. And the next morning, I was qualified to conduct the band for me. And the rest is like, uh, so to bring it forward, I have 3 daughters out of wedlock.
Mhm.
So the first time we all 4 of us got together was on my 70th birthday, because they lived in different parts of the country. And we got together and they became official sisters. And they said, hey, this is great. So like every 10 years, let's get together. So on my 80th birthday, we got together again. And at my birthday party, they said, hey, Pops, who's going to tell your story? Because, they knew about my history with the Temptations. I said, I don't know. They said, somebody need to tell your story. And I said, oh, okay. And so then the idea came to me. I said, well, people are always asking me about things or experiences with the Temptations, and they say, oh, they have a lot of stories. I know you have a lot of stories, right? And so I thought about it, and I said, well, everybody has been writing about all of the stuff with Motown, the Temps, and all that kind of stuff. And I said, but I got to tell my story. So I said, there's a whole history of how I ended up being a kid with no musical formal training, ended up being the conductor, the musical director, the guitarist, and the songwriter to the #1 R&B Black vocal group in the world. And that's what kicked it off.
Well,
And that's how my book chronicles all the way from birth all the way up to now.
that really is like an old school history lesson, because yes, it does pay to take lessons, it does pay to know chords, but that is some old school jazz blues information. Because and what piques my interest even more is how young you were. At 14, I just wanted to know where I could go get the next set of baseball cards that were coming out. I mean, somebody called me and said your ticket's at the airport. I would say, let it stay at the airport. I would never know at that young age even how to get to the airport and do the things you did. So you end up with the Temptations, but you were an African American traveling around the world. So what resonated with you most about your experience with different cultures?
Well, the 3 major experiences. One was when we played the White House. We played Trisha Nixon's birthday party. And I remember, see, I have a sense of humor, right? But it's like a private sense of humor, So when I was conducting the orchestra at the White House, in my mind, I was saying, wow, from the outhouse to the White House. That was like a joke in my mind, And the other experience was the Copa, which was the major nightclub in New York, the Copacabana, when we played there. And then the other highlight of experiences was when we played England we did the live elements to Talk of the Town.
Mm.
That was quite an experience because that's in the book. There was an event that happened with with the actress. I won't give you a name, but it's in the book.
Okay.
You know.
Excellent. We'll have to read the book to find out. Cornelius, on my show, we often talk about the story behind the glory. So what struggles did you have to overcome in order to achieve success in the music industry?
Well, first, in my early experience, it was the age factor because I was young. And unfortunately, I guess the older musicians saw something in me that made me be able to, to play with them, But it was an obstacle because, like I said, I had to play, but in the nightclubs, I had to play, and then I had to stay in the dressing room between sets because I couldn't be out, in the bar or whatever. And the other thing was once we got with the Temptations, we experienced some bias in the South, So a lot of that's in this play that's out called "Ain't Too Proud." All that's covered in the play. I experiences with that, and so those are the two major things. Other than that, it's basically clear sailing. Because like I said, I traveled all the way around the world, stayed in the best hotels, and met a lot of interesting people. So
when you, I want to go a little bit further back in the time machine because we went from you were 14, knocking on the door, getting calls, but getting calls for people doing songs and getting calls for gigs is one thing. But how did the call and how did the alignment between you and the Temptations first take place?
Well, the Temptations, okay, I started with Mary Wells. That was the first artist that I played with at Motown. So I was with Mary Wells, and the Temptations were still doing backup. So we had a gig in New York, and Barry sent the guys out to sing backup with Mary Wells, and do like an open act. They didn't have a guitar player, so when they came and they said, "Well, what songs are you going to do?" So one of the songs that they had in their repertoire was "Gypsy Woman" by the Impressions. Mm-hmm. Well, I knew the song, so they had a little chord sheet written out, and that somebody had played, written out. And I knew the song, but by this time I was reading chords, right? Mm-hmm. So I looked at the sheet and I said, "Do you guys do this like the record, or do you do it like here?" So they didn't know. So I said, "Okay, you guys, I'm going to sit the first show out, and I'm going to follow on the chord sheet and making the corrections that I need to make." So I did that. The second show, I played. When we finished playing, Paul Williams called me in the dressing room, and he said, "Man, I don't care who you with or what you're doing. When we get a hit record, you're coming with us." And we just laughed it off. And so I went from there to Marvin Gaye. I was Marvin Gaye's first guitar player. And then a little later, the Temptations had their first hit, "The Way to Do Things You Do." Mm-hmm. And I got the call. And that's how I joined the Temptations organization.
This is amazing. This is like a commercial for why you should have a phone even back then, because your phone was ringing off the hook from so many different people. But I don't know if a lot of people know about the term Hitsville USA, which is, of course, the epicenter of American music, Motown. So what does the whole Motown movement, it's a culture, it's a family in and of itself. What does Motown mean to Cornelius Grant?
Well, first of all, it was a melting pot, and it was like a college. And when I first was inquiring about Motown, it wasn't Motown at the time, it was Hitsville. And the band that I was playing in, the saxophone player had a drinking problem. So often we would use a substitute saxophone player in his place. One of the substitute saxophone players was Hank Crosby. And so between sets, he was writing an arrangement in pencil. And so I said, oh, this guy, he writes music in the whole bit. So I looked at the top of the sheet, and the sheet said, hitchhike. And I laughed. And I said, that's a song called Hitchhike, Hank? He said, oh, yeah, this is going to be a big song, right? And I said, Hitchhike? Oh, that's funny, right? Well, I didn't realize I was witnessing first repertoire of Marvin Gaye,
right?
You see? So anyway, so now I finished high school. When I finished high school and I left the band that I was playing with, Hank Crosby called me up and he said, hey, listen, I know that you play well enough. Merriwell's guitar player is going to the Army. You're good enough to get that gig. So get your guitar and come down to Hitsville. So I did that. Went to Hitsville, auditioned with Benny Benjamin, who was her drummer at the time. And he said, hey, okay, see Joe Schaffner. Tell him that you got the gig. So I found Joe Schaffner, and he asked me, hey, can you travel? And I was like, whoa, yeah. And that was my first gig with Mary Wells, you know? So that was kind of like the start of my career with Motown. Now, Motown, as I said, was a melting pot. So all of these talented people, you know, I met during my time there because little by little, I met all the artists. And also, in the meantime, in between playing with Marvin Gaye, I played with the other artists, the Martha and the Vandellas, Kim Weston, you know. And then when the Motown Review started, the orchestra leader, he said, hey, we need a guitar player. And so I said, okay. And so by that time, I was reading chords well enough or whatever. And so I started playing in the orchestra. So when the Motown Review toured, I was playing in the orchestra. And so they used to call the guitar players that played the sessions, they call them chink, because, you know, they were all the guitar players, they played like a backbeat with the drum, chink, chink. So the musicians, they named me Top Chink because they said I was the only guitar player that played with the groups that was qualified to play with the orchestra, you know? Oh. And so that was an experience for me.
Well, so many stories in so many years. And just tell us again, I know you're still working on the book, but tell us the title one more time.
The what now?
The title of the book. I know you're still
the title
working
of the book
on
is Cornelius Grant, From Mumford High to Motown and More.
Yeah. I can't wait to read the more, and I want young people to read this book also because there's so much rich history and the tradition of Motown and music in general. Cornelius Grant, thank you for joining us today and sharing so many inspiring stories. To the viewers, I hope Cornelius's story helps you learn more about the incredible impact of Motown in the world of music, and Cornelius was a major part of that. Cornelius, thank you so much for being today's guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.